Mario Lanza may have achieved worldwide fame as a film star, but he always saw himself primarily as an opera singer. He had studied operatic repertoire from his late teens, and by 20 he was already performing complete roles for Philadelphia's Apollo Grand Opera Company. Then, in April 1942, he was granted a scholarship to the Berkshire Music Center in Tanglewood, Massachusetts, by the esteemed conductor Sergei Koussevitzky. At the Berkshire Festival that year, Lanza created a sensation as Fenton in Otto Nicolai's comic opera, The Merry Wives of Windsor, and also won plaudits for his portrayal of Rodolfo in 2 staged performances of Act 3 of La Bohème, one of them under the direction of Leonard Bernstein. But after performing Pinkerton in Madama Butterfly to critical acclaim at the New Orleans Opera in April 1948, Lanza never again sang on the operatic stage. Contrary to popular myth, the reason for that absence had nothing to do with the size of his voice, which could fill any theatre without amplification, as indeed numerous music critics, conductors, and singing colleagues of the tenor have attested. Nor were there any issues with his musicality, vocal stamina, or ability to learn roles. No, the problem was simply that after 1948, Lanza was a major Hollywood star and ill-equipped to deal with the notoriety, distractions, and stress that sudden worldwide fame entailed. Simply put, Hollywood derailed his budding operatic career.
Un regal certo sul primo sorti, vergine di un trono vicino al sol, un trono vicino al sol, un trono vicino al sol.
That brief clip alone underlines why Lanza was so successful in films. But he always intended to return to the operatic stage, and there was one role in particular that he longed to sing more than any other, Otello, in Giuseppe Verdi's magnificent musical rendering of Shakespeare's Othello.
Il pionero delitto sopra il candido giglio della tua fronte è scritto che non sei forse una vil partigiana
Lanza actually left us with about 30 minutes of Otello, drawn from both live radio and film recordings and performed over a 13-year period. We have the 2 long duets with Desdemona, or Desdemona as she is in Verdi's opera, from Acts 1 and 3 respectively, the Act 3 monologue, which we'll be focusing on in this video, and the death scene, which we saw a snippet of at the beginning. He even put in a cameo in the supporting tenor role of Cassio on a live radio performance of part of the Act 1 Brindisi in 1945. But could Lanza really have performed on stage what is often regarded as the most vocally demanding, not to mention emotionally taxing, dramatic role in all Italian opera? Well, as the Wagnerian tenor Stuart Skelton has observed, to sing the role you need a huge degree of stamina, to be equally comfortable at the top and bottom of your range, and you need to be able to cut through some very heavy orchestration and ensembles while retaining as much beauty of tone as possible. Lanza had all of these qualities and more. According to his friend and colleague, the distinguished bass baritone George London, Lanza's technique was such that he could sing for hours without tiring, and in terms of sheer vocal endowment, he had more voice than almost any singer London had ever performed with.
Padre infelice, corro a salvarti.
Moreover, by the end of his short life, Lanza's lirico spinto tenor had darkened, acquiring the requisite baritonal depth of a true Otello, while retaining its brilliant ringing upper register. Listen to his opening lines from a concert at the Royal Albert Hall in 1958.
La solida storia del pastore. Il povero ragazzo voleva raccontarla a dormire. C'è nel sonno l'oblio come l'invidio.
Now that's an Otello voice. Indeed, after thrilling to Lanza's singing at multiple concerts in 1958, his agent, the very musical London impresario John Coast, who also represented such famous opera singers as Richard Tucker, begged him to take a year off just to study the role of Otello. While that wasn't really feasible, Coast did receive a consolation prize of sorts when Lanza went on to perform the death scene from Otello in his next, and as it turned out, final film. We'll return to that death scene later, but now I'd like to go back to November 1945 and Lanza's first association with Otello. Links for the full versions of the recordings that follow can be found in the description below. In this first recording, Lanza was just 24 at the time, still a neophyte but on the cusp of serious study, and the occasion was a live performance on the CBS weekly radio series Great Moments in Music. This particular week was devoted to Verdi's Otello, and Lanza would be performing the Act 1 love duet, Già nella notte densa, with the 47-year-old San Francisco opera veteran Gene Tennyson, of whose voice, the less said the better. But little matter, for the young Lanza was in resplendent form. While he didn't yet have the dramatic colouring and heft of a true stage Otello, just listen to his immaculate diction and phrasing, the ravishing beauty of his voice here, and his feeling for the making of music. Two excerpts are featured here to highlight both the poetry of his singing and his dramatic intensity.
Già nella notte densa s'estingue ogni clamor. Già il mio cuore fremevondo s'ammansa in questo ampleso e si rinsensa. Tuoni la guerra e si inabissi il mondo. Se dopo l'ira immensa viene questo immenso amor mio supremo guerriero, Antilia di lacrime, la storia il tuo bel viso e labbro di sospir scende sulla mia tenebra la gloria e il paradiso che gli astri benedire. Ed io fra le tue tenebre scure splende nel genio l'intera beltà. Tu m'amavi per le mie sventure ed io t'amavo per la tua pietà.
What exceptional singing from the 24-year-old tenor, especially for a live performance and from someone so young and inexperienced. It would be nearly another decade before Lanza would record anything from Otello in a studio, but in the intervening years he performed selections from the opera in semi-public on 2 occasions, once in 1946 at an opera log for the Trenton Opera Guild of New Jersey, with conductor and chorus master from the Met, Thomas Philip Martin, accompanying him on the piano, and again at his home for a group of journalists in 1954. On the latter occasion, he performed the Act 3 duet Dio ti Giocondi with his regular coach Giacomo Spadoni accompanying him on the piano and also providing a falsetto Desdemona. The following year, 1955, Lanza returned to the same duet, this time with a real soprano, Licia Albanese, a distinguished interpreter of Verdi and Puccini, who over the course of her very long career sang with most of the leading tenors of the day. Lanza and Albanese recorded the duet for the Warner Brothers film Serenade, a melodrama in which the opera Otello is integral to the plot. Albanese appears in the film as herself, and although only part of the duet was featured on screen, RCA would release the full recording on the excellent Serenade soundtrack album. Here is most of what we see Lanza and Albanese performing together in the film.
Il fazzoletto l'amico tuo diletto. Il fazzoletto Cassio, perdona. Il fazzoletto è un grido di minaccia. Alza quegli occhi. Atroce idea. Guardami in faccia. Dimmi chi sei. La sposa fedel d'Otello. Giuro, tiranna. Otello fedel mi credi. Impuro ti credo. Dio magnoti. Corri alla tua condanna. Di che sei casta. Casta, lo so. Sarai tiranna. Esterefata fisso.
Leading music critic and distinguished professor of the performing arts, Henry Fogel, has rightly hailed the full version of that performance, not only for the magnificence of Lanza's shining tenor voice, but also for the latter's deep understanding of Verdi's style and the psychology of the scene. There's also a gripping outtake of that Act 3 duet that Lanza recorded 4 months earlier with soprano Gloria Bowe, who was one of Giacomo Spadoni's young students at the time. We heard a bit of it earlier, and the complete recording, which is also included in the links below, is well worth your time.
Smarillo, o perdonarlo è riasventura. Il vero quello, l'hai perduto forse, la cerca. No, questo.
But the version with Albanese remains a stunning souvenir of their memorable collaboration, and for her part, the soprano, for the rest of her exceptionally long life, and she died in 2014 at the age of 105, maintained that Lanza had everything that one needs to be a great singer. The voice, The temperament, perfect diction. Everything was so easy for him, she insisted. And now we come to what is indisputably one of Lanza's greatest operatic recordings, his rendition of the Act 3 monologue, Dio mi potevi scagliar tutti mali. Recorded in July 1955 for the film Serenade, this rendition is the perfect rebuttal to Lanza's detractors, as it provides overwhelming proof of his musicality, intelligence, nuanced phrasing, and vocal prowess. At the beginning of the aria, the tenor has to sing a succession of A-flats, 16 initially, in what some musicologists have called the A-flat or one-note test, meaning that the singer must resist the temptation to stray from the pitch or perform any kind of embellishment. Otello should sound empty, hollow. As Henry Fogel has noted, Lanza passes this test with flying colours. He then takes one's breath away with the beauty of his hushed Al volere del ciel, to the will of heaven, before building to an incredible climax and one of his greatest high B flats. So sit back and enjoy the full rendition of the Otello monologue in glorious, digitally extracted stereo, courtesy of the magnificent Sepia Records CD, Golden Days.
Potevi scagliare tutti I mali della miseria e la vergogna. Far dei miei baldi trofei trionfali una maceria, una menzogna. Avrei portato la croce crudele d'angosce ed onde con calma fronte era segnato al volere del cielo. Ma o pianto tuo m'han rapito il miraggio dove io giulivo l'anima quieta. Spento è quel sol, quel sorriso, quel raggio che mi fa vivo, che mi fa lieto. Spento è quel sol, quel sorriso, quel raggio che mi fa vivo. clemenza, io genio immortal, dal rosco riso, copro il tuo viso santo, colori da larva infernal. Dannazione! Pria confessi delitto, e poscia muoia, confessione, la prova, la cea, oh già.
Well, I think both Verdi and Shakespeare would have saluted that interpretation. It's only fitting that we should now conclude with the haunting final moments of Otello's death scene, Numitema, recorded and filmed at the Rome Opera House in the late summer of 1958. Contrary to Lanza's often unfair reputation as an over-emoter, you won't find any over-the-top histrionics here. As Clyde T. McCants writes in his scholarly American Opera Singers and Their Recordings, Lanza's interpretation of this aria is sustained, moving, and completely without extraneous emotional outbursts. The Rome Opera House's artistic director at the time, Riccardo Vitale, was present at this session and, mesmerized by what he was witnessing, immediately invited Lanza to appear at the theatre in any opera of his choosing. The tenor was definitely interested, and a guest performance as Canio and Pagliacci was tentatively scheduled for the Rome Opera's 1960-61 season. Just 13 months after recording the death scene from Otello, however, Lanza would die suddenly from a suspected pulmonary embolism. How poignant, then, that he should have waited until the final operatic session of his life to record the closing scene from his favourite opera.
Ucciderti, sposa, ti baciai. Morendo nell'ombra in cui mi giacio.